Miami squandered an amazing comeback led by Tyler Herro's 40-point barrage after a costly mistake by Erik Spoelstra, and another tough loss for Miami in overtime against the Pistons. We'll break down Herro's big night and a bizarre ending on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day, and we got a big show for you today. We'll get to why Tyler Herro's 40-point performance should change the way the Heat think about their offense, then get to some listener questions. We'll do all of that in a second, but first, a reminder that your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage, delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, David, another heartbreaking loss for the Miami Heat, who had a 2-point lead with just under 2 seconds left after Tyler Herro made a jumper for his 40th points of the game. Then a nightmare series of events occurs. First of all, the Heat, in a half-court defensive possession, were not able to substitute in Kel'el Ware. They were trying to get Ware into the game for whatever reason, and we're recording this right after the buzzer, so we have not gotten any sort of explanation from Erik Spoelstra or the referees or anything like that. They were not able to get Kel'el Ware into the game, even though Kel'el Ware was on the court, but then got called off. And Tyler Rozier, who had been in he was trying to sub in for, had to remain in the game. And so the Heat were trying to have Kel'el Ware come into the game, presumably to guard Cade Cunningham on the inbound pass. Well, they can't do that. So Tyler Rozier ends up in the middle of the court near Bam Adebayo. There's a miscommunication between Rozier and Bam, which ends up with a wide open lob to Jalen Duren, with Rozier's guy setting that back screen on Bam. They don't switch it. There's a miscommunication. Duren scores with in a seventh of a second. There's no time goes off the clock. Erik Spoelstra, as livid as I think I've ever seen him, and I mean that genuinely, is as frustrated as I've ever seen him, calls a timeout that he does not have. And so the officials wave it off and then call a technical on Erik Spoelstra and the Miami Heat, giving the Pistons, with the game tied, a chance for the game-winning technical free throw, which, of course, they hit. And then that's it. That's the game. A terrible way to drop to 4-6 on the season, drop your first NBA Cup game of this group stage play. So my question to you, David, which part of all of this was worse?
A disaster sequence in total. Just complete mismanagement. I don't think the staff, and I have to put Erik Spoelstra and everybody on the staff and lump it all together there, I don't think they were prepared for this. I don't think they expected to be up to, I don't think they expected to have to come back after they were down, I think, as many as 11 in the fourth quarter. Like, if not for Tyler Herro hitting shot after shot after shot, they would not have even been in that position in overtime in the first place. So I think they kind of just, I think they were winging it. I don't think they were really fully ever aware of how to manage the game properly from that point forward, because they had kind of written it off probably midway through the fourth quarter. So if you're asking me what part was worse, it was clearly Erik Spoelstra's timeout call. Like, somebody on that staff has to say, no, we don't have a timeout. Like, when you're huddling up, well,
oh, you mean before? Like, hey, we can't call the timeout if they if
they had a
miss
commercial
or whatever,
break after going up too. They had a commercial break. They had time to prepare for the inbound pass. Why not make the substitution then? Why have Ware standing in front of Cade Cunningham only for Tyler Herro to say, "Get the hell off the court. You're not supposed to be on here"? I think it would have helped to have the 7-footer in front of a much smaller player.
So you texted me that you saw Tyler Herro wave Kel'el Ware off. I didn't catch that, and again, we have had no time to really process this or kind of watch the game again. I don't know what happened, but is that what you think happened? Because that to me doesn't make sense. Like if Kel'el Ware has checked in at the scorer's table,
Right.
then he's in the game, even if
Right.
Tyler Herro waves him off. And so I don't.
But again, the coaching staff didn't even see that they had 6 players out in the court. Like they didn't let everybody know who was supposed to be out there.
yeah.
Whether it was Rozier or Highsmith. I think Pella Larson was also on the floor at that point in time. Like, it's great that you want to have the idea of wing defense, but guess what? It also helps to have this really tall human being, making it much more difficult to throw that kind of perfect lob pass.
I mean, that's clearly what they wanted. They clearly wanted Kel'el Ware in front of Cade Cunningham, and I don't know what happened for them not to have that. That's what the staff wanted. And so I don't really know what happened there at the end.
At some point when they're designing this kind of defense, again, you're up 2, you're like, oh, it's all, happy puppy dogs and ice cream time and everything's great. And you're all up 2 and you're kind of saying, all right, they're going to inbound the ball. Khalil, you get out there and stand in front of the inbound pass. Well, somebody should have told Pella to sit his ass down. Somebody should have told Terry Rozier, you're not in this one, buddy. You just rolled your knee a second ago. You're not out there anymore. You played enough. Believe me. You've done enough damage already.
I can't wait to get the explanation from Erik Spoelstra. And again, I mean, this is the struggles of doing this right after the buzzer and trying to get this podcast out as soon as possible, is that we don't really know what's going on. Maybe by the time we get later in the show, we'll be offered some sort of explanation from the beat reporters there on the ground. Yeah. But
Winterman, you're our only hope.
Ira Winderman, Anthony Chang, do your work. Somebody's going to ask him the question. I'm sure of it.
What happened there?
So we'll get to so let's put a pin in that for now instead of trying to guess what exactly happened. What I do know for sure is that Erik Spoelstra lost his bleep, and he knows he does not have a timeout in that moment. Nobody has to tell him. He's been around forever. I think he got so frustrated by whatever happened on that last play, and there was clearly a miscommunication. That is, by the way, basketball 101. On that back screen, you switch that. You always switch that. There's no other way to defend it. You can't get over that back screen.
Considering what Niko Jovic just did against Minnesota, like, shouldn't you have been prepared for somebody to do the exact same thing that you did
against you? It's such a great point. And so that's why I think Erik Spoelstra just got so frustrated that he called the timeout knowing he didn't have it. Like, I'm telling you, I've never seen him that upset. It was all of the Erik Spoelstra faces and memes just scrunched into one enormous overreaction. And so it was obviously he's not gonna sleep tonight. You know that. But there were so many other reasons why the Heat lost that game. Not just that, but I don't know that Erik Spoelstra has ever cost the Miami Heat a game so blatantly with a decision or two. Right. That was that's like something reserved for being like pre-Mike McDaniel Miami Dolphins fan. It's, you know what I mean? Or just like all these other teams in the league that are going through coaches every 2 years. Like that's not been the Miami Heat fan experience hardly ever for the last decade. Like I can't recall the last time Erik Spoelstra just outright blew a game like that.
Yeah, not during the Big Three era when the microscope was on them 24/7. Not at any point in time can I recall him just, you know what? I just totally forgot. We didn't have a timeout.
Brain fart.
Brain fart. Can you imagine them just kind of going up there on the podium, just saying, "Sorry, brain fart, just lost."
Happens all of us. It's like it doesn't happen to you. It never happens to you.
Yeah, he is the guy. Especially again, like so many kudos and deservedly so for designing a hell of a play against the Minnesota Timberwolves to get that winning layup, and then to kind of just flip the script completely to where you're making the mistake of somebody who maybe an assistant coach, like after the head coach gets tossed out on technicals and you're kind of taking over the game and you're mismanaging and you don't know exactly what's happening. Like Darvin Ham last year, maybe, somebody like that. That should not have happened to Erik Spoelstra at this point.
So here it is. Sorry to interrupt, but Barry Jackson just tweeted. Here's Erik Spoelstra's quote. "I made a serious mental error. That's on me. I feel horrible about it. There's no excuse for that. I'm 17 years in. I knew in the huddle we didn't have a timeout. I got emotional in the huddle. I made a horrendous mistake." So it's exactly what we thought happened there. Meanwhile, maybe the only bright spot of the night was Tyler Herro. 40 points in that game. The Heat wasted an all-time night by Tyler Herro. But what can they take away about how they should run their offense going forward? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need in the same place to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, or you want to check out latest stats from around the league, and you want to view live play-by-play, well, you can do that and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets, but only if you visit FanDuel.com and join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You could probably place a bet on when Erik Spoelstra will cost the Heat a game. You won't cash in because it's unlikely to happen, but hey, who knows? That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show: subscribe on YouTube, follow us on your favorite podcast app, leave a 5-star rating and review. Let us know in the comments section what was the most heartbreaking, roughest part of the end of that game. But we're going to spin it a little positive here. Tyler Herro, unreal performance in this one. 40 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists, 14 of 27 shooting overall. Made 10 three-pointers in this game, including 3 in the final 2 minutes of regulation. 9 straight points to bring the Heat back and tie the game and force overtime. He was unreal. Those 3 straight three-pointers.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to use this name, David, but I'm going to do it because it's exactly what it reminded me of. It was Steph Curry-like. It was, oh, there's nothing you can do. It doesn't matter. Like a couple of those were open. That third one he made off the left wing, contested, sort of like shifting to his
fading away
to the side. Yeah, fading away. I'm like, you don't make that shot. You have no business making that shot, especially with the heat check. Like those heat check shots never go in. And so it goes in, and I was like, this is Steph-like. And so I'm at the point now where, okay, so Tyler Herro is leading the Heat in scoring, and it's not close. He's the only one averaging 20 points per game, and it feels that way. And his efficiency has been off the charts so far this season. He has taken less than 10 non-paint two-pointers all year long. He's basically eliminated the mid-range shot from his whole shot diet, which is, again, remarkable. This is a 180. This is a different player than we've seen in the first 5 years of his career. He's flatly a different player. His shot chart is different. All of it's different. He's getting to the rim more. He's playmaking more than ever, which is very important. His playmaking's never been better, right? I mean, how many times have you seen him drive into the teeth of the defense and kind of do that sort of sidearm bullet pass out to one of the corners? I mean, that's his bread and butter as a passer now. And so I'm at the point now where it's clear Tyler Herro, with the struggles that Bam is having offensively, finding his spots in this new offense, with the clear decline that Jimmy Butler has shown over the beginning of this season. Tyler Herro is your best offensive player. He led the team in scoring last year, and he's leading the team in scoring by a mile this year. And what do you do with your best offensive player? You build the offense around him. And I think we're at the point now where the Heat have to just they've built some of the offense around him in terms of just, I don't know, I guess prioritizing the more efficient shots. But is that building your offense around Tyler Herro, or is that building your offense for the year 2024? I would argue the latter, right? You just have to. But what would it look like if they were to actually say, you know what, Tyler's the head of this snake now. We have to build it around him.
I kind of feel like that's what it has, because again, you're right in terms that they're modernizing the offense from whatever it was that we've seen over the last few seasons. And that's totally fair to point out. At the same time, it's kind of also maximizing your best offensive player. So I think, in a sense, maybe it's not the full,
it's like both
leaning into what Herro does or saying we're building the offense around him, but you're putting a great offensive player in a position to succeed. And that's what Tyler has been. Like, for all of his other struggles, they've done a great job of setting screens for him, making sure that he gets opportunities, limiting those inefficient shots. And he's embraced that. I think it's I think they've kind of shown him, look, we need you to take over the offense. Even if they don't necessarily say we're giving you the keys, they're kind of giving you the keys. Maybe more like a valet than anything else. It's like we're temporarily giving you the keys until such time as Jimmy either feels engaged or is capable or wants to, or is maybe even possible for him to do so. So I think that's kind of where we're at right now, is that they've done everything they could to put him in a position to succeed, and he can do that. He can carry the offense. He's done it. And unfortunately, it hasn't translated to any consistent sort of winning, and that's part of the problem, is that they just haven't done enough. And I know that's not on Tyler. You're not going to knock him tonight when he almost single-handedly carried this team back from the grave. So at the same time, it hasn't been a fair balance either, though, because I don't know if you can maximize what Tyler does and at the same time expect everybody else to find their place in the offense, because it's looked clunky, and we've seen that over the first 10 games of the season. They're still finding their footing. Either Jimmy struggles, Bam struggles, Terry Rozier, and maybe it's just that. Maybe it's just a couple players here and there who have struggled on individual nights, and that's what kind of takes away from what Tyler has been able to accomplish. At the same time, I think you're still focused on giving him the ball and making sure he does what he does, and he looked phenomenal tonight. So I mean,
should they do it more? So I guess that's my question: is you've already you've maximized Tyler Herro's, you optimized Tyler Herro's skill set within this offense, and I've always argued like this is the right offense. This is, even though yes, it does sideline Bam Adebayo a little bit. What was good for Bam last season was not necessarily good for Miami's offense, which still ranked in the bottom 10 offensively, despite Bam's sort of point total career year. His true shooting percentage had never been lower than it was last season, because all his shots were coming from the most inefficient parts of the court. And so Miami's offense was limited in that way. Well, okay, you shifted it to more of a modern offense, threes and shots at the basket. You had to do it. Bam has had a hard time finding a spot. I still believe Bam will find his spots in this offense. It's just going to obviously take a much more it's going to be a much steeper learning curve for him than it was for somebody like Tyler Herro, who is a natural born shooter. Right? This guy, we've been talking about this for 2 years. He should be shooting the ball from three, catch and shoot, taking 15 3-pointers a game. And that's not even an exaggeration. He took 17 3-pointers in this game, 27 total shots. He's averaging, coming into tonight, 16 total shots per game. So my only thing is, just keep doing this. If Bam, Jimmy, and Terry Rozier are struggling so much, communicate, hey, like Tyler Herro, not only do we want you taking 10 to 15 threes a game, we want you taking 20 shots a game. I mean, that's where Jason Tatum is. That's where Anthony Edwards is. That's where LaMelo Ball is. Like, guys whose offenses are clearly built around them. 20 shots per game? I mean, it's not that much. You know, we're not talking about like Russell Westbrook, James Harden from like 7 years ago. We're talking about 20 shots per game, which is typically what a star kind of gets. And for better or worse, Tyler Herro is their only offensive star right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I find it difficult to accept that, because it just seems like he should not necessarily be the primary option and the hub of what they try to do offensively. Like, you have to be able to get everybody going. And maybe again, you know, if Terry Rozier just has like an average night, not even the abysmal night that he had, Miami wins this game, and all we'd be talking about is, yeah, absolutely, you give Tyler the ball and let him do it. But it's just right now, it feels like it's more of default of him having the ball and being able to score as often as he does, not just because the offense has been tweaked, but because nobody else is capable of doing it, even though people are certainly putting up shots, whether it's Jimmy or Bam or Terry. I don't know. I don't know if you want to lean into it necessarily. I feel like you should. And at the same time, it feels like maybe, again, it's just because it's coming off a loss. I don't know if that's necessarily the key for Miami striking the balance that they need.
What would it look like then? I mean, let's play it out a little bit more just to kind of get a sense. So to me, I'll go back to the comparison I just made with Steph, right? Like, you want to get this guy as many 3-point shots as possible, easy shots. And who's the guy that creates the easiest shots for Tyler Herro? It's Bam. Bam with that screen game, the dribble handoffs, all that stuff that he does. Could he be the Draymond Green to Tyler Herro's Steph Curry? I think that's a fair, maybe, sort of comp to make. And so you look at that and you say, all right, it's just going to be a lot of that kind of two-man game. I think you also want to maximize those transition opportunities, because I feel like Tyler Herro is 100% shooting on pull-up threes in transition this season, right? Yeah. It's like he can't miss on those shots. And so maximizing the pace and all of that. And that means, you know, obviously bringing Jimmy Butler's role down a little bit. But like I said, I think Jimmy's been waiting for that to happen. You know, I don't think I think he'd be the last one to complain.
You've made the comp, though, for years that Herro should embrace more of a Klay Thompson-esque role, especially Klay, the version that you saw up close to the Golden State. At the same time, that would take him away from the comparison to Steph Curry, and who is that Steph Curry player on this team then?
There's nobody, right? Exactly.
Right. So if you take Bam out of it and put him in a Draymond-esque role where he's just kind of setting screens and making plays for others, which is totally fine, and I think he'd be fine with that. He was capable tonight, and he had a pretty decent game overall. Without Rozier's help, without Jimmy Butler being able to be the productive player that he has been in years past, you're still missing that secondary option. And so
You are.
I don't know.
It's tough. I mean, maybe is that Jimmy? Is Jimmy that secondary option where he's playing off of all of that stuff? I mean, that's kind of what he wants to do anyway.
Like he's suited for. Yeah.
It doesn't really. Yeah. I mean, because when he's playing off of it, he's just standing in the corner and then he takes over in the fourth quarter. I don't know. I guess maybe everything I'm saying is a little bit too dramatic, but I would at least say this.
Yeah.
Empowering Tyler Herro to take 20 shots per game at this point is probably a better thing. He is Miami's only efficient offensive player right now. So him taking 20 shots per game would just be moving the offense in a more efficient direction. And so I would just say, keep feeding this guy. Maybe at the end of the day is the only thing that we're really saying. And maybe bring Terry Rozier's role down a little bit, which leads us to our listener questions. We're going to talk about that. Plus, is Erik Spoelstra losing his touch? Is it time for a starting lineup change? All of that and more coming up as we get into your listener questions here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first monthly bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about those gotchas ever again, because when Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages, because Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Now, a $45 upfront payment is required. It's the equivalent of $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on an unlimited plan, and additional taxes, fees, and restrictions do apply. See Mint Mobile for details. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Well, it's time to get to some of your listener questions. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. We'll get to this first one coming from 28 years and counting on Twitter, who writes in, is Spo losing his touch?
In what sense?
I guess that's the question. This was a uncharacteristic mistake at the end of this game, but maybe the key word there is uncharacteristic. I do not think Erik Spoelstra is losing his touch. I do think it's very difficult for a team to change dramatically when the personnel doesn't change dramatically. Sure. And there's not any amount of coaching that can really just change the way a team plays. It's very kind of by wholesale, right? Like turning a Heat team that was slow in pace, didn't get up a ton of threes last year, was a little leaky defensively, all these things last year, to just be none of those things with basically the same personnel. I don't know that there's a coach ever born that. I don't think John Wooden can do it. It's just, I don't know that Pat Riley could have done it. And Erik Spoelstra has had a hard time doing it through the first 10 games here. So is Spo losing his touch? No, I don't think so. I would love to see what this guy could do with an elite roster.
You see, we were texting during the game, and this was in the first half, I believe, when they were down big, and it looked like they were just going to be blown out. It just was an ugly start to the game, and it was just totally abysmal. You thought that Spo was clearly frustrated, and maybe this was just you kind of looking at what he's doing and everything and how he's adjusting in the course of the game, or maybe it's just, again, watching over the course of the whole season. You think he's frustrated with this roster. My counter to that was I think he's had input, etc. But regardless of the roster that he has, I still think that there's some blame to be laid on Spo for managing the roster that he has. It's not a great roster. It's not perfect, etc. I totally get that. But you went with, let's say, Thomas Bryant probably a little bit longer than you should have. You went with Kevin Love. Like, he struggled tonight, and he continues to struggle. Like, that was a bad matchup for him. Like, we talked about it prior to the game when we recorded our episode early this morning. We said, you know what? Jaime Jaquez is probably the better option because he has the speed, he has the ability to switch. Tobias Harris was cooking Miami early on, and Kevin only played a few minutes in the first quarter and only a few minutes in the third quarter and really offered nothing of value. So, I mean, he hit a 3-pointer as Miami was making a comeback in the third, etc. But it still was not a great matchup for him, particularly defensively. And then, of course, something that we'll talk about a little bit later, there's the whole burning Terry Rozier question of what to do there. Like, I mean, on a night when Terry Rozier struggles as badly as he does.
I'm sorry, I want to put a pin in the Terry
that.
Rozier thing. So, but in terms of
My
Kevin
overall point,
Love,
though.
Nikola Jovic, Thomas Bryant, it
Yeah.
just feels like Spo is scraping up the bottom of a barrel that doesn't even exist. Like, it's just like he's got no options for this fifth starter. None of them are working, and he has no good options. And so he tried Nikola Jovic. He's trying Kevin Love now with this Luke Babbitt minutes rotation. He went from Thomas Bryant to Kel'el Ware, none of whom seem ready to contribute. Like, there is not a good backup center on this roster, and not currently. I think Kel'el Ware needs the playing time to get there, and I think he'll get there. But right now, that guy doesn't exist on the team, and I think he is frustrated with the roster and whether or not how much he does have input. We know that he has input on how the kinds of players that this team will go after, whether or not they should re-sign somebody like Thomas Bryant or Josh Richardson or whoever it is, right? Alec Burks. But he can also say, get me more talent, but he's not the one who can make those trade phone calls. He's not in charge of the front office. He's not the one in charge of executing it. So his input could be heard, but not executed by the front office. And I do think there has to be a level of frustration from Spo, just being like, geez, again, with like the same roster, and you're trying to make, like, you want me to work miracles out of this. Like, every year you guys want me to pull a rabbit out of my hat, and it's not going to work.
Maybe I get it, but at the same time, like, you know, there have been some choices that he's made which are probably not great. So to the overall question, no, he's not losing his touch. Like, you're only as good as the high level of quality of your roster. If you've got a great roster, chances are you're gonna be able to maximize it. But even in years past, when we know the roster hasn't been ideal, and I'm not talking about recent history because you've had a superstar in Jimmy Butler who's, as you said before, probably entering a stage of declining. At the same time, like, you've been able to maximize bad rosters and get them to win and play smartly and find a way of balancing minutes much more effectively than what we've seen from them.
I'm like, the minutes part is not even like, I mean, I make this joke all the time, but it's not like Kevin Durant is sitting there on the bench and he's not playing them. Like, we're talking about like the difference between playing Thomas Bryant versus Kel'el Ware more minutes and bad options at power forward. I will say this. The other night, I'm forgetting what the opponent was, but it was the home loss where, you know, Terry Rozier again is in at the game in an important defensive possession. Haywood Highsmith's not in the game in an important defensive possession.
Sacramento.
The Sacramento game. Thank you. There's been questionable late game decision making from Erik Spoelstra that has been very uncharacteristic, and it happened against Sacramento. It happened against this game, in this game too against Detroit, and so that stuff is at least worth monitoring here, is this late game execution, because you could argue that Erik Spoelstra maybe cost them a couple of wins here with that late game execution. We're talking about, instead of being 4-6, potentially 6-4, and that just feels very different, doesn't it? So and 1-0 in the NBA Cup so far. Not to ignore that.
Yeah,
But let's get to our next question about Terry Rozier, just because we're running out of a little bit of time here. So.
Yeah.
We've got two questions about Rozier. I'll read. We got a bunch of them, but I'll read two of them. Amir writes in: should the Miami Heat start Herro as the point guard, bring in Duncan Robinson as the starting shooting guard, and move Terry Rozier to the bench because he's been so ineffective lately? And then Nathaniel writes in: why does Spo continue to go with Rozier not only late in the game but playing him so many minutes when he's ineffective? Let's do the whole Terry Rozier conversation.
Yeah, I think it is time to make the switch as to why Spo plays him as much. I think he just still likes his ability to break down a play because it leads to a potential offensive option. And that's the thing, is like, I mean, Rozier's getting to the rim. The fact that he's just kind of fading away from it and putting up these high off the glass shots that aren't falling more often than not doesn't take away from the fact that, you know, we've said it from day one when the trade took place. He's a guy who could put pressure on the rim when Miami had no one like that last season. He's at least doing that. But if it doesn't translate into anything, if you're not getting any points out of it because he's just not hitting those shots because they're so terrible, let's be honest.
I mean, the best thing that happens when Rozier gets to the rim is he passes it. Like that's the only that like he generates
Yes.
offense in that way, and that's
Yeah.
actually been very beneficial to Tyler Herro, who's been, the guy who's been catching and shooting off of those passes quite a bit so far this season, and so that's
And
been, I think, the argument of keeping Rozier in there.
Yeah, he drove to the rim at one point. I think there was one play in particular. He drove to the rim again when Miami was making their third quarter comeback, and he wound up swinging the ball to Haywood Highsmith in the corner, who was able to knock down a three. That's what you're kind of looking for,
Yes.
in the sense that Rozier can be a playmaker, and there's nobody in this. Like Drew Smith can't do that. Tyler Herro can. And if that's the case, then it kind of ties into what we were talking about the second segment. Like, if you want to turn the keys over in effect to Tyler a little bit more, then you just have to make him the sole ball handler, because Duncan can handle it. And I think we've seen enough from his offense and his three-point shooting, although he did struggle tonight. At least I think so. Off the top of my head, I can't recall exactly well, 2 of 10 from three-point range. So not great, but he was still able to attack the basket and make plays in other ways too. So I think he's more of a complementary player. We've talked about this before, but the defensive issues might be more of a concern. But Rozier isn't much better defensively either. And so I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'd be willing to try something and see if maybe you could do that and then just kind of take the ball out of Jaime's hands in that second unit. But that kind of feels also where Jaquez winds up being most effective, is when he has the ball and is able to kind of go downhill in a half-court offense and then kind of figure out that spin move, etc. At the same time, I've got to say, like, his timing can still be excellent. Like, he's shown the ability to use that timing and the up fake and be able to get a clear look at the basket. But the spin move, to me, and I don't know if it's just the kind of, the stomach issues he's had of late, or if it's just a sophomore slump or anything like that, it just doesn't feel like it's as effective as it was last year. I think the kind of rest of the league is figuring out, look, he's just kind of got to bully at, like,
against it.
Yeah, he's going to bully his way there at three-quarter speed because he's not the most explosive athlete, and he's going to kind of unload the slow winding spin move. Last year, everybody was like, what the hell is that? No one was prepared for it. This year, as you said, it's on the scouting report. I think people are expecting it. It seems like he's getting that shot blocked a lot more than he was in last season.
He is, and they can definitely use maybe somebody like Rozier in that second unit to make it easier on him, right? I don't think you want Jaime Jaquez running your offense. I think it's fine. A second unit offense, either having some help there could help. Definitely help. Yeah.
If Terry has the ball in his hands and he's doing what he does, like, Jaime has shown the ability to be a really good rebounder and be able to put back those shots. So if anything, they might complement them. Yes. They might complement each other in a way that nobody in that starting lineup currently can.
So, that was sort of Caleb Martin's job last year, right? And so I'd be open to it. And this is kind of going back to my point about maybe you rebuild around Tyler Herro a little bit. If you're taking Rozier out of that starting lineup and putting somebody who's a little bit less usage in that spot, then that kind of forces not only Tyler Herro to be more involved, but maybe even more of Jimmy, more of Bam, when Jimmy's healthy. And I think that could be a helpful thing. You've got 4 out of 5 guys who need the ball in their hands in that starting 5. And you could even argue maybe Nikola Jovic needed it when he was in there, and Kevin Love's got to get off a couple of shots here too. And look, everybody's going to need the ball a little bit, but maybe surrounding Tyler, Bam, and Jimmy with 2 other guys who don't need the ball cleans things up a little bit more on offense, while also tightening things up defensively, right? And so maybe Haywood Highsmith deserves a permanent spot in that starting 5. I thought the lineup that I proposed before the season even started was Tyler Herro, Haywood Highsmith, Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jovic, and Bam. Maybe that's an option. Or maybe it's Kevin Love in the Jovic spot if that's something that Spo really wants to keep doing. But, I think having more defense there.
Would you tweak that lineup including Duncan Robinson then? Like, it's Tyler, Duncan, Jimmy, Haywood.
You got to be a little bit better defensively. And Duncan, he's been good. I think he's better coming off the bench at this point. I think you need to just have as much defense out there as possible, and there hasn't been enough defense. Like, we keep talking about, like, Terry Rozier's offensive struggles, Bam's offensive struggles. Defensively, the Heat were a mess, especially in the first half of this game. They need to be better defensively. They're just not good enough. And so I think you got to put your best defenders out there when the opponent's best scorers are out there, and that's starting 5. And so I don't know. It's tough, right? There's not, like I said, Kevin Durant's not sitting on the bench. And Spo isn't just not playing him. I don't know that there's a ton of really great lineup options on this team now. The Heat don't have a very positive lineup so far this season, but maybe it does take a little bit more mixing and matching. All right. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.